This panel discussion delves into the often overlooked experiences of both carers and people living with invisible disabilities. We'll explore some of the unique challenges they face and highlight the importance of community support. The first cohort we explore are carers. Did you know that 1 in 6 Tasmanians are carers? In our society, volunteers are celebrated and recognised for their contributions, but the tireless work of carers often goes unnoticed. Carers, who dedicate their lives to supporting others behind the scenes, are much like invisible volunteers. The second cohort we explore are people living with invisible disabilities. In Australia, over 5.5 million people live with a disability. It is estimated that 80 to 90% of these individuals have an invisible disability. There are also 12.6 million Australians living with a chronic health condition. By highlighting the experiences of those with invisible disabilities, we can challenge misconceptions, reduce stigma, and promote a more inclusive society. We hope you enjoy this panel discussion.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's panel event and morning tea. We're delighted to have you here today for this event in collaboration with the City of Hobart in the lead up to International Day of People with Disability. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional lands upon which we meet today and pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. Now, today's panel discussion is very much aligned with the theme of invisibility, and we will be focusing on 2 very overlooked cohorts within our community. First up, carers who, due to the selfless work that they do, quite often metaphorically become seen as invisible volunteers within society. And then we have those living with invisible disabilities. Today, we're going to explore some of the unique challenges they face, but also really highlight the critical importance of community support and advocacy. So thank you again for all being here. Now, I am joined by this wonderful panellist, with our host, Jane Morrell, who is the CEO and founder of Carers Solutions. On the panel, we also have Julie Ryan, who is the Chief Executive Policy Officer at Carers Tas. We have Sophia Saltmarsh, who is a mother, grandmother, and primary carer. We have Scott Davis, who some of you might know. He works here as a community resilience officer. Scott does have experience as a carer and also lives with an invisible disability. We have Lynn Russell, who is the CEO and founder of Invisible Disabilities Australia. And we have Alderman Bloomfield, who is chair of the Hobart Access Advisory.
I'm absolutely delighted to be here today. I founded Carers Solutions over 13 years ago, and it was really driven by the experience of carers and hearing the stories of what carers in our community needed, and also a lot of their frustrations as well. So this topic is very important to me. So thanks again for everyone for being a part of today's all-important discussion. We'll start with yourself, Julie. Can you start by giving us some of the top-line statistics on carers in Tasmania?
Yeah, sure. And firstly, I'd just like to say I'm really grateful to be here today and to have the opportunity to share some of what I hear. I have a few statistics written down, but most recently, data is showing that there's more than 87,000 carers in Tasmania. Wow. So when we're talking about carers, we're talking about family members and friends who provide support to others in an unpaid role. And that might be because the person they're supporting has disability, they might be ageing, have a chronic or life-limiting condition, have mental ill health, alcohol and other drug dependence, and we also support people caring for children through informal kinship care arrangements. So out of that more than 87,000, roughly 9,300 of those are young carers, so people aged 25 and under. More than 50% of carers have some form of disability or significant health condition themselves. Just over half of those carers are female, but there are many male carers out there as well. I could go on, but they're kind
Yeah.
of the high-level statistics that we know.
Yeah, there's some incredible statistics that we've got there. And I guess given that and from your extensive experience, what are some of the emotional challenges that carers are facing?
Thank you. So I've got a quote actually. So recently we've received some results back from our 2024 National Carer Survey. So this is actually something that a Tasmanian carer responded. So they said, having to do so many things for the first time with nobody to help and not having any step-by-step instructions, you feel so lost and alone. It does become a struggle financially, which only adds to the stress and the worry, which pushes you to breaking point. I think that comment really resonated with me when thinking about the other statistics that we know. So that same survey showed that across Australia for carers, roughly 60% of those carers reported being socially isolated, and approximately half experienced high or very high levels of psychological distress. From the Tasmanian respondents, about 70% of those indicated they were socially isolated or they had limited social support, and roughly 50 said that they were experiencing psychological distress. So I've worked with Carers Tasmania since 2015 now, and over that time I've had the privilege of hearing from many different carers in so many different situations. And I think that social isolation is one of the major challenges experienced by carers. And that social isolation has actually been shown to have impacts on carer wellbeing. There's impacts on employment and educational outcomes, which directly result in challenges financially. There's impacts on being able to, get out of the house, socialise with friends and other family members. Some people, the person they're supporting, might not want to leave the house or might not be able to. So there's some really significant challenges there. There's also a lot of grief often associated with caring, and that's not just, if someone that you're supporting is nearing the end of their life. There's grief associated with, how things used to be or what could be, and there's often a lot of guilt as well. I will say that part of our organisation, Care to Serve, they provide the National Carer Gateway service here in Tasmania. So whilst there are these really significant challenges, there is a lot of support available. So they offer, and I won't list them all now just because of time, but they offer free counselling, information sessions, peer support groups and things like that. I will just quickly end this question on a positive note though. So aside from all the challenges, there are positives such as resilience, empathy, problem-solving skills, and importantly, taking the time and having the ability to nurture, provide connection, and provide a sense of safety to the people that they're caring for. And that's really important to recognise that.
Yeah, amazing. And just given that social isolation is probably one of the biggest issues that are facing carers emotionally, are there specific sorts of programs? Are they your peer support groups?
Yeah, so Care to Serve have over 30 peer support groups across the state now. Some of those are based on location. So, for example, there's Kingston sort of support group, Huon Valley. Some are based on the type of caring role. So there might be peer support group for caring for someone with dementia, for example, or caring for those with disability. And then we have other groups which are like a male carers group. So it's really based on the need that is in the area. And some of those groups like to have guest speakers come along and talk about different supports, and some of those groups just like to catch up and have a chat and actually not talk about the caring role.
Yeah, wonderful. And some people may not realise, but there's actually a Carers Recognition Act in Tasmania. Can you share with us a bit more about the purpose of the Act?
Yeah, sure. So last year in Tasmania, the Tasmanian Carer Recognition Act was enacted. We were actually the last state to have that piece of legislation passed. All the other states have had Carer Recognition Acts for quite a long time. I guess the main aim of that Act is to improve recognition and identification of carers out there in Tasmania. So there's no legally enforceable penalties with that piece of legislation, but it's an Act that aims to get people talking and get people thinking about who might be a carer in your local community, in your workplace, in the business that you work in, and how you might actually support those people. So before, when I said more than 87,000 carers, that equates to roughly 1 in 6 people. Yeah. So carers are everywhere. Some people identify with that word carer, and quite often some don't. Yeah. And that piece of legislation is about recognition. It's about guiding Tasmanian government-funded services in how they can better support, recognise and identify carers. And it really is a tool for carers to use, to help them understand what their rights are. Yep. Within the Act, there is what's called a Carers Charter, and that has 7 items in that charter, and they're all around that recognition, about including carers in decision-making, about supporting carers to access information that is important to them, supporting them to participate in social activities, employment, education, and all of that. And alongside the Act is the Tasmanian Carer Action Plan. Now, that plan goes until next year at the moment, and that plan sets out actions that Tasmanian government departments have said that they will do to better support and recognise carers.
I guess if people are aware of the Act, which they are now, is it something that you would advise that they let their employer know it exists if they're looking for flexibility in the workplace and things like that?
With the Act, it really governs only Tasmanian government agencies, but workplaces outside of that, it's still a good resource. It still kind of shows the importance of supporting carers. People can also connect with us if they're wanting information on resources that they can give to their employees as well. But yeah, it's a really good tool to help discussion.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Julie.
Thank you.
We'll move on to Sophia now. Now, Sophia, you've been a carer for your daughter Tiffany for 41 years. Can you speak to us a little bit about your journey and share your experience with us?
The beginning for me was Tiffany was whisked away within minutes of her birth, taken 3 hours away to a neonatal intensive care paediatric unit in Portland, Oregon, where they basically had to experiment in her care to keep her present. She had to be resuscitated multiple times a day for the first year of her life. She was in the hospital for the first 6 weeks on a ventilator, having multiple reconstructive operations. They did not know what all was wrong with her. There was ear, nose, and throat problems, but she had Charge syndrome, which we've only just discovered in the last 2 years. I don't even know how to compact all of this. And so I had to do serious medical training to take my baby home from the hospital. That's basically what it was. I was 20 years old. I was traumatized. I was stressed. I became violently ill myself from the stress and developed a life-threatening illness, which I now still battle to this day. There was little support from my family or friends. They didn't know what to do, so they just would say, "Are you okay?" and they would leave it. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this. And so I just knew that I had to look after her. I had to try to keep her alive. So I did even more training from the pediatric intensive care nurses. There was nursing care in my home for 12 months straight in America. I would relieve the nurses in between their shifts so they could have a meal or do something, but in between that I would be sitting with Tiffany a lot as well. When she was home for those first 12 months, she had oxygen, she had an ambu bag, she had a whole cabinet of medications that had to be administered at different times. Every 15 minutes she had to have deep suctioning just to keep fluid off of her lungs, and I also had to do some training in physio so I could give her physiotherapy to keep her lungs clear. So that's a lot of information, but I thought that may interest some people. And so as the years went by, it was just very difficult. I became almost despondent in care for myself. I forgot to pursue the things that I loved when I was young. I put down my music, I put down my art, all the things that meant a lot to me. And to conclude, what I've learned, it's really important to look after yourself as carers. Your life is just as important as the person you're caring for, and to never forget that is very important. To access any type of help that is available for you is most important when you are having a bad moment yourself, or you're having a time where you just need to retreat and reset and look after your own health. There needs to be more support for carers in Australia. There needs to be retreats where they can go away and they can rest and recover. We really need to get something going here. And that's what I have to say about that. Now, Carers Solutions Australia, when I discovered them, it took a huge load off of me. I wanted to hand select and tailor make a care package for my own child, and there was every agency I'd ever gone through before did not offer that to me. It was decided by them, and with many failures in that. And so when I was able to hand select someone I knew and I trusted, and my daughter loved and trusted as well, it was the perfect solution. So right now, we are very, very happy in that. But nonetheless, in Australia, I believe there needs to be a lot more support for carers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess based on your extensive experience, obviously over a 41-year period of being the sole and primary carer for Tiffany, what advice would you give other carers, and especially to those who've recently become carers?
Don't forget yourself. 3 words, don't forget yourself. Because the minute you do, it isn't good, because your quality of care will not be the same either, because you have to look after yourself before you can give 100% to the one you love and you're caring for. That is very important. You have to have a little bit of time for yourself. It can be the smallest thing, you know, just taking even 5 minutes break and doing something you love, reading a book, playing an instrument, taking a walk, whatever it may be. Some people just like to rest and sit quietly and have quiet around them. Whatever it is you need, it needs to be applied.
Amazing advice. We've got the opportunity now for some questions from our audience. So has anybody in the audience got a question that I'd like to ask Sophia?
So I think that I don't have a question. I just want to contribute to the importance of taking care of yourself, but a little bit of a reflection on how we actually accept that self-care as a society, because just a very common example of how society actually is shocked. I'm a recent mom. I have a 16-month-old baby, and when he was born, like when he had like 8 weeks, I was just like, okay, so today I'm going to go for a walk in Richmond, and because I'm tired, and I'm going to do this for myself. So when you, as a mom, which is very common, you say like, I'm not going to take care of my baby today because I'm tired, society is actually in shock. And the reaction is like, oh my God, how come you dare to say that you're tired if you are his or her mother? This is just how we actually accept when a carer says, I'm tired. Yes, we have a duty, we have a responsibility, and we love this person that we're taking care of so much, but we are just humans, and that we need understanding from society, and we need some pressure off from all of us in the room as well.
Yeah.
So that's very hard to get, and it's very hard for everyone, even those who love you, to understand that you're just a human. So I just wanted to contribute on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a great comment. I mean, you know, I think we can all relate to that, and that's why we're so encouraging and needing conversations like we're having today, so people understand the challenges of carers that exist for everybody that's out there, and the things that we need to do and put in place to ensure that we are carving out that time and that self-care, which is absolutely critical. So it's that awareness in the community at large that we definitely need to push. Couldn't agree more. Yeah. Did you have any comment on that, Sophia or Julie, from your perspective?
We shouldn't feel guilty. We should not feel guilty to take time for ourselves. I felt guilty for years. I thought it was my fault I had a baby with problems. I thought it was my fault that my family wasn't being loving enough toward me and the child. One family member didn't believe that she would survive, and so they just ignored a lot of things, you know, and that was so hurtful. I'm sure there are many that have experienced this.
Yeah.
You cannot, you know, go on feeling guilty about things that are inhumane for yourself, you know, when you need time. It's taken me so long to learn this lesson. I am still learning this now, because a mother's heart or a carer's heart is to literally lay your own life down for the person you're caring for. It's all you can think about is helping them survive, improving their quality of life, and making sure that you're doing a good job because you love them. And sometimes it's a bit blinding because we're not realizing we won't be there to care for them if we don't care for ourselves, of course. It sounds like common knowledge, but the truth is applying that is extremely hard sometimes. Absolutely. But we need a place, people need a place they can go to rest. That needs to be provided. That is so important, and I have yet to find a retreat for people who are in desperate need. I want to know, is there anything out there like that for those who are really suffering? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, no, great point. And if anybody in the audience can contribute to that and understanding what might be available in the local community, it would be wonderful to hear. Did we have any other questions for Sophia? Yes, Julie.
But it's just to add to your question about carer retreats. So Care to Serve, part of our organisation, does run some carer retreats throughout the year. These are really, really popular, so it can be quite difficult to get a place. But we do release a calendar of events each quarter of the year, and there are usually retreats across the state. And I think the comments that we receive is that they are so helpful. They're usually where carers get to go and stay at a hotel for a few nights, and we've built in some information, education, peer support throughout those. And whilst they're really well received, I take your point, there needs to be more support, and particularly for carers who are in that in the moment situation where you just need something then and there to help.
Definitely. It's so important to have this conversation and create that awareness. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sophia. Moving over to yourself, Scott. Now, Scott, you were a carer for your late partner, Mari, and whilst grieving her loss, you also yourself suffered a stroke. Can you tell us a bit more about this and how it impacted, and also how it has changed your life?
I talk about there being two Scotts. There was a Scott that existed when Marie was alive, and there is the Scott that now exists post her death and post my stroke. And those two events occurred within 6 weeks of each other. So there were two significant events in my life. Marie and I had been together since we were 20, and we grew old together, and over that time our bodies changed, and at different times we had to care for each other, some short term, some longer term. And in Marie's case, a chronic illness from about the age of 40 was a great challenge for her in terms of her movement, and she often woke with daily pain, and I needed to assist her to be able to get through the day. She was a really strong person, and she certainly was able to look after herself and did all the right things to be able to look after herself, but there needed to be adaptations that needed to take place every day between the two of us for her to be able to function. And then sadly, her end of life came from a cancer diagnosis, and so there was a really short period of 8 months where it was, often weekly medical appointments that required quite a lot of effort. And then her life ended, and for me that became the start of the new Scott. There was for 37 years I had been Scott, as in Scott and Marie, and suddenly I was now just Scott, and that was a real challenge for me. And so grieving that, but also grieving. I woke up the next morning after her death, and it was just like my purpose was no longer there. What is my reason for being here? And that has been a struggle for me for the last few years, is trying to find who the new Scott is. So I had grief, and I had this new purpose, and then 6 weeks later I had a stroke, which also has changed the way that my brain operates. And I've struggled with both of those things daily. I was talking to some people before. I woke up this morning feeling quite light, which is a unique thing for me to wake up with. A heaviness that sits in my brain when I wake up most days can determine what my day is going to be like. And it's carrying the grief, and I still get up in the morning thinking about the things that I might have to do for Marie to get the day happening, and this is 2 years later. So there is this old Scott, and I know the old Scott sits inside my brain, and the new Scott knows that the old Scott is there, but it's often a challenge to try to find who that Scott is.
Yeah.
So there is this hidden disability in terms of my brain functioning, but I also developed double vision, so I have a deviated right eye, and that has been a real challenge, adapting to life. Even coming into this room was very confusing. This is a room that I work in, but this room was very confusing with the layout, the cameras everywhere, there's stuff on the floor, and because I have double vision, everybody on this side is all doubled, and all of you on this side are all like you would normally be, but it creates a confusion for me that I have to try to manage each day in the way that I see, and then in the way that I think. And so it's been a real life-changing moment for me. Yeah. Absolutely.
And I think, given your experiences, and obviously there's been a multitude in there, what advice would you give people who acquire an invisible disability later in life?
So I can only talk about what my experience is. I can't tell other people how they should respond.
Yeah.
So I was a policeman for 30 years. I know how to advocate for myself, and I can be quite assertive. My new brain doesn't do that well at times. I forget to back off a little bit when I become a little bit over-assertive. But for me, the biggest thing that I found was I needed to find an independence for myself, and I was struggling to find that independence, and I also struggled to accept the support that people were offering. But eventually one particular friend came into my life, and she enabled me to be independent whilst supporting me being independent. And I don't even know that I can fully explain how she did that, other than there is a no-nonsense that comes with the way that she deals with me. It's just get on with it sort of thing. And so it was allowing myself to trust somebody else to look after me enough that enabled me to remain independent. That trust then enabled me to test my abilities and my boundaries, and through that ability to just test things out, my confidence has grown. And if I talk about this particular individual, she encouraged me to travel with her to China. I flew to China on my own, navigated international airports with double vision, with a brain that doesn't necessarily work as well as it used to do, into Beijing where there was no English spoken, but she gave me the encouragement and the confidence to be able to do that, and that came through finally trusting somebody.
Yeah, that's incredible, and I guess that speaks to ensuring that you've just got amazing people around you to support you, and finding your tribe, so to speak, and looking for those people that you know will be that incredible support, and the importance of having that, in that network. Excellent, excellent. We'll move over to Lynn now. Lynn, can you tell us what you do at Invisible Disabilities Australia, and what are the top 2 issues that you guys are currently advocating on?
Okay, so I have several disabilities, all of them unseen, some of them acquired recently. I was also the carer for my mother with dementia for over 11 years and all the difficulties that went with that, so I understand all of that. So, as someone who convinced the whole Parliament, including Gareth Evans, Paul Keating and everybody else in the Parliament, to unanimously agree on a resolution about the human rights abuses in Tibet, and to meet the Dalai Lama as the first leaders in the world to do so, I had all that background, and I had no idea until I got cancer, until I was abused for using disabled toilets and parking for not looking like I needed them, that so many people in my society were struggling. And I guess I didn't really look at the struggle I had when I was a carer of my mother. I just got on with it, but clearly it impacted on me. So we've got lots of issues that we work on, and I hope you might be able to have time to look at our website, to look at all those issues. We work towards a vision of a society where all of us can reach our full potential. I apologise for reading this. I've recently had breast cancer, and my estrogen blockers have affected my memory. So more to deal with. A society without barriers, a society designed for the needs of all and not just some of us. A society, during the DRC hearings, Special Counsel Kate Eastman said before to a PM&C executive, we hear so much about what people have and why we should support them, but the how is sadly missing, and there's no doubt that the how isn't. So many action plans have things like make sure people are treated with respect and this and that, but how? And how do we do that? How do we recognise them? So at the same time, the DRC wrote to IDA as part of our 4 submissions and said it's evident that your organisation has promising practices, innovations and recommendations that interest in achieving a more inclusive Australia, which is where we all want to go. But what would that look like? Well, it must include the needs of over 12.6 million people with chronic health conditions. We only define 5.5 million people as being disabled, and that's a very narrow definition. If we don't support people who are chronically ill or need support and have chronic conditions, who are stressed or are anxious, then there's no doubt that and I'm not reading now, so I keep losing my train of thought, that we're going to see a further escalation of chronic health conditions and the over 9 suicides a day that we see, which is just scandalous in a country like this. So if we continue to see inclusion through the lens of marginalised groups and particular disabilities, we will never get there. We must look at our needs and rights and not what we have, because most of the people we are in contact with, including me, have several medical conditions, and we need different things in different circumstances. So we should be ashamed in this country that we have escalating mental. We should be ashamed that we take a piecemeal, casual, unregulated approach to inclusion, that our federal government doesn't lead the way. Professor Gerard Quinn, and I encourage you to read his submission to the Disability Royal Commission. He was the now retired UN Special Rapporteur on Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And he gave us sound practical advice before the DRC. I hope you'll read it. One outstanding recommendation was that we need to problematise the barriers and find practical means and create legislation to support and include the needs of all of us. And we haven't done that.
Yeah.
It's like he's invisible, that government's going off on some tangent, sorry. He said people with disabilities should be approached as persons with equal rights and expectations, and secondly as persons with impairments that might require special attention.
Yeah.
And so I think IDA's practical solutions go a long way towards creating that. That's evidenced by the Disability Royal Commission, the support of 400 stomal therapy nurses, the Honourable Michael Kirby, the Honourable Gareth Evans, and the Dalai Lama, of course, who says that this is about compassion and kindness, and at the heart of it, it is.
Yeah.
So in the 80s, when I lobbied for Tibet, if you mentioned human rights or compassion and kindness, they thought you were some sort of lunatic. Well, at least now we can say those words, and that's a good thing. Empathy is one thing.
Definitely.
So I once asked the Dalai Lama what was the difference between feeling sorry for and compassion. And he said, very distinctly, compassion has action, and action must have wisdom. So we can't just go off doing whatever we like. We really need to make things valid. We deserve the best support you do.
Yeah.
So how do we go about this? How do we, when we need support, how do we communicate our rights and needs to... We're right holders. How do we communicate those needs to the duty bearers? One way, and it's only one of our initiatives, and I don't want it to be seen that this is all we do. So one of the things I created, and this was all I was going to do to start with, is a card that communicates your rights and needs. So if you ask someone to scan this, it says, if someone's asked you to scan the QR code on their card, please ask them what they need and not what they have, and ask them if there's anything they need. I've been abused at disabled toilets, now I hold this up, and hardly anyone ever abuses me anymore. I shouldn't have to be defending myself. So for people like me and 50,000 people like me, going to the toilet is like performing a small surgical procedure on yourself. It's stressful enough to be in there, the toilets don't work, they don't have the right facilities, and they come out and someone have a go at you or criticise you. So the other thing we did, and this has been worked out over a longer time, is a please open an emergency card. So this is amazing and has saved my own life. So that has all of the stuff that you need on it, and I'm sure you can read it, and I'll hang it up out the front so you can see it.
Love that. Yeah.
So you don't have to remember. You don't have to be rifling in your bag, remembering your Medibank number and so on.
Yeah, so important.
When I recently, and it also has on the back, please ask me what I need, not what I have. So when I had an event in Canberra Hospital, kept me to my timing, where I was literally dying, or they thought I was, and I had a reaction, all hell broke loose, buttons were pushed, there were machines going everywhere, and they kept shouting at me, stay with us, Lynn, and I had my card around my neck, and I forgot about it. And I'm just lying there like this, where they're saying, don't shut your eyes, don't shut your eyes. And I thought, what about the cat? And I looked down, and I handed them this, and they said, oh, this is amazing, because they're all trying to get into some computer to look out my allergies, look out my next of kin, find out who my surgeon is, what might be wrong with me. Who knows I've got an ostomy unless it's written in this card. So they absolutely loved it. And when I got home, because of the cat, I put a section on the card, unattended pet at home, because that was all I cared about when I thought I was dying.
No, I love that. And I think it's really important. And thank you for sharing those cards that you guys have designed. And I think that important message around asking people what they need rather than what they have is really critical. And I think we can all take something out of that across the board. I think we've got time for a question or a couple of questions. If anyone in our audience has a question that they'd like to ask Lynn.
I'm Maya and I have an invisible disability. I'm on the autism spectrum. And I'm just wondering, can I sign up for one of those cards down here today?
Sorry?
Can I sign up for one of those cards?
Sure. So outside, and I'm happy to talk to you, there's some brochures and you can scan the QR code. It takes you straight to the site. If you're getting NDIS funding, you can use your funding. They're $25, and unfortunately I can't do an invoice and then this and that and the other. And you upload a photo, which means it's really looking valid for you. And And I know that 300,000 people in this country as a minimum are on the autism spectrum. And the misunderstanding that everybody, there's programs out there that look at quiet places, creating the misunderstanding that everybody with autism has the same needs and things. And I think that's really dangerous. And if you watched Austin on the ABC, and I think he's just fabulous, he wasn't sensitive to noise, but he could be quite direct and rude, and someone could think, oh my God, he's so rude. But there's a little chance that they might see this round his neck and think, is there anything you need? Rather than thinking he's being aggressive. And I think autism is a huge thing, and I really look forward to getting it covered.
Okay, thanks.
And I'm happy to do it all for you out there and take a picture and everything.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions in our audience? Yep, just up the front here. Great.
I was the one who giggled at the estrogen comment as an older woman.
I wasn't going to say that, but it's true.
I was just really interested in the differentiation between, and does it matter, between the things that affect you ageing and things that you would describe as a disability. Do you describe estrogen depletion as a disability, or is that, you know, are there things that are just ageing? What are disability, and does it matter, or do we need to differentiate?
That's a great question. And our government, when they're assessing us for NDIS or aged care, they look at your functionality, and yet they define us by our disabilities, and they count 5.5 million of us as being disabled in their view. And I'm currently talking to ABS who are finding this quite challenging. So you may not know that the government is spending $70 million on a disability asset database to count 5.5 million people to ask them what they've all got. What the hell does that mean? What if they find so many with this and that? And I know this is controversial, but LGBTQI people wanted to be on the ABS. So why? What do they need in society? And I hope that what I do is empowering you not to be resilient, but to communicate your rights and needs in society, because that's what we need to focus on. The word disability is really awful, and I wish, and we couldn't, have called this at the beginning 7 years ago, Invisible Impairments Australia. And I don't like the word hidden, because I think we hide things we're ashamed of, but invisible is things that others can't see. So, sorry, I've forgotten your question because my estrogen blockers. So I don't think it's relevant. And I think everything I do, it's like the Disability Royal Commission didn't exist. I mean, Quinn is just spectacular in what he put and what he's done all around the world in terms of this. He said we need to turn the ship around. We need a quantum shift. We need innovation. And I think what I've created with so many people in consulting represents that, a blueprint for the beginning of change in our society. I mean, I have Aboriginal people, young people in Aboriginal communities with fetal alcohol syndrome or young onset Parkinson's who are being accused of being drunk and disorderly. So they've been defined and judged on what they have. And one young man, his card was returned undelivered, and I rang up and his nurse said his mother's hysterical. Every time she goes out, they're pulled up by the police as if because they think he's drunk. So how do we feel safe in society? And if you have any ideas as to how you think I can extend this, this is something I created for you. This is something I created for our society. And if there's anything that you think I can do better to help you, I'll do it. If you want to step forward and be ambassadors for change, I'm changing the word to crusaders, then do so. So I live in Canberra. So I'm the only organisation who put a submission into the Supermarket Inquiry Code of Conduct that actively excluded your needs in the supermarket. Special aisles. There are people with orthostatic tremor who, when they stop walking, they fall over. I have people who take bowel stoppers so they can go shopping because they're incontinent and they can't afford to let loose, so they need priority lanes. We need chairs. The people who work in supermarkets need chairs to sit down because they're standing up for 9 hours a day. So we were active, and your senator, your Green senator, Senator McKinn, who ran that, stood before the Parliament and said human rights did not apply. Either he didn't read my submission or he doesn't know anyone who's disabled and has trouble navigating And the same thing's a supermarket. The same thing's happening with ACCC. They actively excluded us. We are unfairly impacted by cost of living crisis, but we're also unfairly isolated and impacted when our needs in society are not supported. And supermarkets, I was abused at Canberra Airport leaving yesterday. Airports are horrendous. Chemists, there's no chairs, there's no parking, and there's building standards, which I put in my submission to the supermarket inquiry, that there be a certain number of disabled parking spots for every number in. Who knew that? And why aren't they applying it?
Yeah.
And why are they not as close as possible to the entrance to supermarkets, airports and so on? Sorry.
Yeah.
I've now lost my brain completely.
No,
Did I answer your question?
I don't know if it's answered.
What? And Scott, I'm so sorry about everything. And I really appreciate all you all do for your empathy and for your concern and compassion. And you want to help me, I'm here.
Great. I think we've got time, and there's one more question just behind you there.
Hi. I just wanted to ask, do you think that the idea of invisible disability will continue? Because essentially, like if you're looking at political resourcing and everything like that, we are in a minority. So, you know, when you're collecting statistics on who has what and whatever, we're always going to sit in an invisible category that isn't really, you know, going to receive a lot of financial benefit. So is then the output going to be that we're going to have companies like we have over here that are like social companies or social enterprise that is going to continue to support the industry rather than political? So will we remain invisible?
Estrogen blockers again, sorry. So there's no doubt that Invisible Disabilities needs to have a charitable arm to keep it going with a board and so on, and that's something that I will work towards and setting that up. 12.6 million people in this country have chronic health conditions, and I think that's the issue that we need to focus on, rather than invisible or definitions or who's got what or whatever. Hidden disabilities, invisible. I just started this platform with that in mind, and it stayed there, and nobody else is in that space, so it sort of works. So I met with someone in Shorten's office, a senior advisor in Melbourne, last year, and when I walked in, he said, "What you've done, we should have done that. That was our job." And I agree with him. What you've done is amazing. We see this as world best practice. We want this for the Olympics. They need this for the Olympics. They need this there for society. And then he said, you'll have 2 government departments behind you, which I'm not sure I thought was a good idea, having worked in the public service and seen the way they can't operate. And then he said, we'll put it on my gut. And I said, how will that work for people with drop epilepsy who are sitting on the floor and people are walking past saying, look at the druggie? How is that going to work? They can't say, oh, look up MyGov. How would it have worked for me when I had an event in hospital and everybody thought I was dying, including me? How did they instantly work for me? Yeah. And he lost interest. So we've applied for a grant. In a way, I don't look after myself in the same way that carers don't, because this is what I do. And this is, Justice Michael Kirby once said to me, human rights is a just cause, the right cause and the only cause. And it is. It is true. Except he's now a vegetarian, and I'm sure he'd added lots of other things in. Did I answer your question? Because I lost it again. Tell me again if I didn't. Yeah.
Thank you, Lynn. That's wonderful. Such great insights into the incredible work that your organisation is doing. Thank you so much. We'd love to speak to Alderman Louise Bloomfield now. Alderman Bloomfield, what is the City of Hobart doing in the access and inclusion space?
Well, one of the interesting things about council is that we're not really just roads, rates and rubbish. We play a real significant role in supporting people with disability through initiatives that increase awareness, improve accessibility and inclusivity. We have the Access Advisory Committee, of which I'm the chair, and we support council with a number of things. For starters, we raise awareness through campaigns and education. So we work with the council staff and the broader community to assist people to understand that disability is not always visible and to provide information and resource about how we can provide support to employees in the community. We also run access awareness campaigns to raise understanding around disability through the community programs area, and things such as Respect the Space and Hobart's Respect All are two recent campaigns that we participated in. We have an accessible community coordinator who is responsible for access to disability across council, and they work closely with our community group and the community to deliver campaigns and events like today, for instance, and we celebrate the International Day of the People with Disability. But we also provide accessible services. So we advocate and provide sensory-friendly spaces at events. And we've developed access guides at some of our community venues, such as Mather House and Youth Arc. And the Doone Kennedy Hobart Aquatic Centre is near completion for that as well. And this guide aims to make visits to our venues stress-free by offering enhanced access and information detailing the sensory elements individuals will encounter during their visit. So we're not just talking about it, we're doing things that actually have genuine meaning and change. And this comprehensive guide contains all the information necessary for visitors to assess how well our venue meets their individual needs and from the convenience of your own home. And we feature vibrant colour photographs, concise text and descriptions of sensory experiences. And the aim of the Access Guide is to enhance people's experience at the time of the venues. We also provide inclusive programs, and we offer programs that cater to a range of people's needs within the community. So we have quieter times at the pool. We have virtual options for people who might not like attending meetings in person. So, for instance, when we hold our Access Advisory Centre meetings, we tend to have a number of people attend via Zoom who on that particular day might not necessarily be able to participate in person. We also have easy read guides for documents, which does make a difference. We have connections to a range of community providers who share information and resources that we pass on to the community members. And we are currently developing a diversity policy to create pathways for people with disability to engage in council employment opportunities, which is new and very exciting. We're also in the process of apply an access and inclusion lens across council and encourage the best practice and continuous improvement. So our group, the Accessory Advisory Committee, is actually assisting the council with the development of policies and practices that promote access and inclusion in line with the Community Inclusion and Equity Framework and the Social Inclusion Policy. What is wonderful about those particular meetings is that we have so many people who actively participate. We've got a meeting next week, in fact, and the all range of disabilities will be there on, participating actively so that we actually do learn from the people themselves exactly what these things mean and how the community and council as a whole can evolve and change to meet the needs. The things that literally we didn't know until you told us.
And what supports or programs are available specifically for carers?
Well, we do understand that the essential role that carers do play with supporting of people with disability. Yeah. And in relation to the supports, we actually do have some opportunities there. For instance, at Mather's House, we have the Dementia Cafe, which is, I believe, quite a good success there. And welcoming inclusive environments and facilities for all activities, such as sport grounds, playgrounds, parks, community halls, and so forth. We also have a youth centre called Youth Arc, which is also a place of respite for young people with a caring role and a chance that they can actually connect and engage with their peers, which I think is just as important as well.
Mm. Absolutely, absolutely. Excellent. That brings us to the end of today's discussion. I'd like to thank our wonderful panellists for their time today. Julie, Scott, Lynn, and also Sophia and Alderman Bloomfield. Thank you so much for this time this morning. It's been absolutely wonderful to speak to you all. Also thanks to the City of Hobart for this amazing event today, and also to the fabulous Megan down the back there for hosting us today. It's really been an incredible morning of conversation. Really appreciate everybody for being so open and sharing their personal experiences with us. It's certainly meant a lot. I know myself, I've certainly taken a lot away from today's discussion, and I certainly hope everybody in our audience today has as well. And thank you to our audience for attending this morning and being a part of such an important discussion. And hopefully, you know, this is just the beginning, and together we can continue the conversation and also create the much needed awareness around so many of the issues that we've touched on today. So thank you so much.